Knight defends the pawn. We'll start off with this incredibly simple position where we're already defending our pawn with the knight, but unfortunately we're not defending it from a very clever place. Black's threatening to take our knight, and then that's just a draw straight away. We need to defend the pawn from one of these three squares, and we can very easily with knight c4. Knight c4, king d4, knight back to d2. The knight defends the pawn, and if the black king comes in and takes it, the b pawn runs. So we can now just leave that situation on the queen side is stable, and it just gives us time to bring our king over, when of course it's an easy win. So that's knight defends the pawn. Keeping it simple, if the pawns are locked, then if black's got a pawn as well, then it's actually easier to defend the pawn than if the pawns aren't locked. I'll show a different position in a sec. And there's lots of different ways of winning this. You could probably work one of them out over the board, to be honest, even if you're playing on increment. But one simple way is we're going to bring our knight to b5 to first of all guard the d4 square. And that means that black's got to come round, say king e4, and then we can bring our king in. Black plays king d3, and then we defend the pawn from d6. The only way that black can make progress is to come and attack our knight. And just to sort of show how we've basically got ignoring the 50 move rule, we've got an infinite number of moves now with our king. Let's just play a silly move, just to show that we can just move the king all day if we need to. Again, ignoring the 50 move rule. King h2, obviously a ridiculous move, but let's have a look at it. King e5, and then knight back to b5. The point is that black has to play two moves to attack our pawn, and then we just play one move to defend it. And then black has to play two moves to attack our knight, and then we play one move to get back to where we were. So we get a free move with our king every two moves, which means that we can just keep moving our king in rather than stupid moves like king h2. But let's see that. King in, knight defends the pawn. Okay. King back, and in fact, it was pretty quick. I say, after a while we'll move our king in. It just happened straight away. Already we can stop the black king coming to e5. It's over. Okay. So it's fairly simple to defend the pawns when they're locked like that, and the method I just showed is a pretty simple way of doing things. There's others, but what I showed is sort of easy to understand. Even if it's not necessarily the quickest path to victory, it's still pretty quick, and it's easy to understand and implement. Now, if the pawns aren't locked, it's a bit harder, because black's got the c4 square. They're in the locked position, their pawn was stopping them attacking your pawn. Here it's not as easy. So, for example, if king g2, then black can come in and attack. King e4, king g3, for example. We attack the pawn, knight defends it, and the black king comes in. The black king has forked the knight and the pawn. So king g2 is no good. If knight b5, trying to defend the pawn a bit earlier, king to d5, knight a3, king then back to e4, king g2, king d3, c4 to defend the pawn, probably a best shout, and then the black king just comes and attacks the knight. It's worth saying here, actually, by the way, after this king takes knight, if the white king had started on h2, then that was a way to win it, because the white king would have made that journey instead of that one. So at this stage, king d6 would now win the game. But if you play king d5 here, you lose the game. So do not play king d5. You just have to accept. These are the mined squares. I've done a video on mined squares, and you just need to accept your c pawn's gone. You need to be ready to play king c2 when black takes on c4, and it's a draw. So yeah, knight b5 doesn't work. What if we tried a combination of king g2? This king comes to e4, then go knight b5, and again the king d3. Let's try king f3, and again we can just fork the knight and the pawn. So it's very annoying, isn't it, that king coming into c4 or they go to e4. These are two pretty good squares to control. I mean, I've said in another video I made on knight versus pawn that unlike the other pieces on the chessboard where you can sort of just look at them and see where they might go next and think about whether you want them there, knights, it's much harder to do that. And I might be wrong, but I think about knights more the other way around. I think about where I want my knight and then how to get it there, the path to get it there. Or I look at a chessboard at any given time, well, when I'm playing well I do, think about where my opponent wants his or her knights and start looking at their path to get there. It's like, right, they're going to get their knight there, I don't want that. And then, you might interrupt the path or whatever. You think about knights the other way around, I think. Not always. I mean, sometimes you can just sort of, a knight's there and you can look at it and go, oh, that can now go there, that's bad. But let's put it this way, it can be helpful to think about it the other way around. So if we want to guard those two squares, those are pretty good squares to control. We want our knight here on b6. How are you going to get there? Well, knight a8. I mean, if you showed someone this position and just said, guess the first winning move, and then showed them it's knight a8, they might think that's crackers. And a lot of knights versus pawn endgames, some of the ones that Grigoriev invented, they do seem crackers, but they seem less crackers once you realise all we're doing is thinking about where we want our knight and then getting it there. Knight a8, and you're choosing the path to get it there. Knight a8, king d5, knight b6 check. King comes back and attacks the knight. It's probably black's best plan to try and draw this. But then you can go knight c4. And when the black king comes in and attacks the knight again, what you can do is create a barrier. Okay, so knight d2, and we've got a barrier there that stops the black king coming in. You could even create the barrier on the other side after king b5. I mean, I think you can still play knight d2 here if you want. We're still controlling those squares. It's going to take ages for the black king to get round to b2. And then you can actually just defend your pawn from e4, and by that stage your king's easily going to defend the knight. It's going to be winning. Okay. But knight b2 creates the same the same barrier. And it's just a win. So yeah, well done if you found. I mean, I didn't give you a chance to pause the video actually there, but knight a8 is the correct first move. Okay, so now I will give you a chance to pause the video on knight defends pawn. We've seen the idea of knight defends the pawn. Have a go at this one. It's white to play. Pause the video and see what you come up with. So I've given you a chance to pause the video and have a go at it. If, like me, you chose king e6, bad luck. You just messed it up. So I messed this up when I first did it. There's an odd even thing going on with knights. Knights can't triangulate. There's like an odd even thing going on. So yeah, king e6, I thought I was being clever because the point was after king g5, it's great, I've got the opposition. And that's what you want here, right? You want the opposition. But actually, you want the opposition when the black pawn is on h5, not back on h7. So h5 here, and black just draws this. And we could do a little bit of a king dance. But black's got the opposition as the king's dance. So the only way to make progress, I mean, I'm not going to bother dancing around with the kings first, is knight back to e3. That wrestles the opposition off black. King g5, king e5, and now black can push the h-pawn. And when you play g4, you needed your king on e4. You want to play king f3 here, and obviously you can't. Your king's not close enough. And that's going to be a draw. I mean, you've got to be a bit careful not to lose it, although it is drawn. Of course, we are already on the circuit. We can just play knight f1 there and give up the g pawn, and our king's already pretty close. That's an easy draw. But we didn't want to draw it. We wanted to win it. Excuse me. So the winning move it's kind of almost the more natural move, the more not trying to double think it, not trying to be too clever, is king e5. So what can black do from here? I mean, the first point is that after h5, we've now got the opposition. If we wanted it, king e4 would be fine. But in fact, king f6 coming around the back. As soon as black moves the h pawn, we can just come around the back with king f6. And yeah, that's clearly winning. Black can't push the h pawn with our knight on f5 because we just take it. The knight defends the pawn, the king defends the knight. So that was h5. Like I say, king e4 also works because you've got the opposition, but king f6 is even simpler from there. If black plays h6, same thing, come around the back. This one there's a bit more to look at because you've got king h5. You've got a couple of different ways to win this, but probably more than a couple probably. But one simple way is just take the pawn because it's a winning king and pawn ending. In fact, black's only got one legal move there, which is king takes h6. But you could also mess about. You could play king g7, and when black comes back, then you can come back to the g6 square. That's another way of doing it. What else could black try? We've tried h5, we've tried h6. Let's look at king g5. So king g5, now we can play knight e3. And I mean, black's king's getting pushed backwards. So if they push the pawn, then we can come to e4. And when they push, then we are ready to play king f3. What else could they try? Here they could try king f3. We don't mess it up with king f6, just out of interest. We don't mess it up, but we do actually now have to come back to e5 and try again. In fact, that's the original position, so you'd have to play king e5 there. But at some point, you're going to have to, in this position, play king e6. Again, it's the odd-even thing going on. We wanted to go to f6 in 2 moves, not 1. And we can. We can triangulate with the king. Can't triangulate with the knight, but we can triangulate with the king. King h5, knight e3, it's done. So yeah, well done if you found king e5 as the first move. I messed it up, I played king e6. Right, this one I enjoyed, and I got it. White to play, pause the video. See what you make of it. Can you come up with a winning plan? Your king's miles away, so you're going to have to find some way to defend your pawn with your knight as the king gets closer. And the main problem you've got is that black's going to push the a pawn. You know, they're going to push the a pawn to swap with your b pawn. You haven't really got an effective blockade. I mean, you might think of getting the knight to a3, but the black king's just going to come into b3. So what on earth do you do? So the correct winning plan is you defend the pawn from a1. Knight b3 is the brilliant first move. It's a winning first move. Knight b3. If the black king comes and attacks you, you stick your knight on a1. Now what we've done there, I've already marked up the board, is the knight from a1 is defending the a3, b3, c3 and c2 squares. So if the black king wants to hassle your knight, look at the route they've got to make to come round and hassle it. If they push the a pawn, then when the black pawn arrives on a3, then you've got knight c2 check. We'll see that in a sec. But yeah, that's the path that the black king has to come around and hassle your knight. So if instead we see a5, we can bring our king in, king d6, and yeah, if black pushes the a pawn, we pick it up with check, like so. I mean, if they shifted their king to c4 with the idea of then, we can just play king c6 with the idea of them pushing the a pawn. Now we can actually just take it because it's not defended by the king, and there's no way the black king can get to it. We could even defend it from c2 there. Look on our next move. So they can't do that. So their only plan really is, like I say, to try and get round to your knight. But if you think about getting round to your knight, they've just wasted a move. with king b4 because they could have come to c4 straight away. So let's go and look at that. You play knight b3 and black attacks your knight from c4. So yeah, knight a1, king d3. I'm coming round to get your knight. We can get our king to d6. King c1, and now we push the b pawn. Black comes in with a dual purpose king move. Our knight's fallen, by the way, there. We have lost our knight. There's still a chance to mess it up. If you play king c5, it's now just a draw. That's actually very easy to see. Black plays king c3. You can't do anything. If you move your knight, black takes it. If you move your king, black takes your pawn. If you move your pawn, black takes your pawn. So that's just a draw. So you have to be a bit careful. Again, it's like the odd even thing. You can't triangulate with knights. So you have to triangulate with the king. King c6. Black attacks the pawn. You can defend it, but this time you force the black king away again. Black king back to b2. Then you attack the a pawn. Black attacks your pawn again. King a5 is perfectly fine, but you've actually got knight c2. Clever, defending the pawn straight away. And it's a win. So yeah, very well done if you found that winning plan. Knight b3 to a1. I mean, I guess the main point of it was you're blocking the a pawn, but even if you weren't, I mean, we've got this knight c2 check, forking the king and the pawn, so black can't play that a3 pawn push. Right, next, this is white to play. This is actually from a game from 1911 between Nimzowitsch and Rubinstein, so two names you probably recognise from various openings. White to play, what would you do here? This is in Dvoretsky's tragicomedy section because Nimzowitsch actually messed it up here. So a good first step is again, where do you want your knight? Think about where you want your knight and then think about the path. And that's exactly what Nimzowitsch did, I would presume, because we want our knight on d7. If you can just sort of plonk the white knight on d7, like the g-pawn goes, but we've won. And the white knight's guarding e5 and f6, so that's where we want our knight. So Nimzowitsch did that, you know, he found a path to d7. And after the g-pawn gets taken, knight c5, king f5, knight d7. Win for white. Why was that bad of Nimzowitsch to play knight d3? Well, the problem is that Rubinstein didn't just sort of politely take the g-pawn. Rubinstein played f6. Takes. Knight back to f2 to defend the pawn, but the king's too far away. e4, king d4, king f4, and it's a draw. So you can't do that. You can't play knight d3. It's the same idea still, but you don't want to hurry. If you play king b4, your g-pawn's defended for now. I mean, black can play f6 or f5 still, either of which can be taken, and it's still a win, but we've got some simpler wins from here if f6 or f5 is played, which are worth just looking at. But king b4, let's first of all see what happens if black comes in and just attacks your e-pawn. Okay, because now you want to play knight d3 check. Your king's just one square closer, and you know black hasn't played the f6 or f5 move that you did after Nimzowicz's knight d3. g4 pawn falls, knight c5, king f5, knight d7. It's a win. Okay, so let's look at king b4. What happens if black plays f6 or f5? Like I say, f6 you can just take it, but it's not shaky, but a simpler win here is knight e4 check, and then I don't know, king where? King f4, king takes g4. The pawn just runs. In fact, you can see this is just a very simple win. You know, the only thing to stop the pawn from running is the king back to g6, and we just take. So f6, knight e4 is a very simple win. And if f5, again, we could take it en passant, but actually taking here is again a very simple win. If pawn takes, our knight's already blocking the black f pawn, so we just bring our king into c5. That's a very easy win. And if king takes, then we defend our pawn from d3, and the king's coming in. In fact, I think even straight away king c5 is a win, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, well done if you played the king anywhere to the b file. That was the way to win it, but the plan was get the knight to d7. Just don't hurry. Good motto in endgames, don't hurry. So this position here, this is from a game from 1976. The white king is in check. And, I mean, we're looking to draw it. It's not looking great, to be honest, because this pawn's about to fall. There's not really much you can do about that pawn falling. I suppose there is. You could bring your bishop back to d2, but we've got to put our king somewhere first. So, I mean, king c2 is probably fine to reserve this square for the bishop, but you can even play king c3. There's loads of ways to draw it. King c3, for example. The a pawn then does fall because the bishop to d2 doesn't defend it. Bishops don't jump. But, you know, after knight c6, the knight's given up control of c4. The king might come in and take your e-pawn. But this is just a reasonably easy draw. Bishop to e7. Takes. It's a draw. But in the game, and this is why it's gone into Dvoretsky's tragicomedy section, white played king d4, thinking they were being clever. And in a way they were being clever, because this game did end up in a draw. They've obviously, you'd hope they've obviously spotted knight f3 check, forks the king and the bishop. You've just blundered your bishop, but presumably it wasn't a blunder. I actually played a game recently where I did blunder. I blundered a piece to a knight fork, and it turned out it wasn't a blunder. It was one of the luckiest things that's ever happened to me in chess. But anyway, I presume this guy didn't blunder. He's deliberately dropped the bishop, knowing that he's going to come in here, win the b7 pawn, and black's not going to be able to hang on to that a6 pawn. The only move to hang on to it is knight c6, but then you come in and hassle the knight. And black's going to have quite a job rearranging the knight to defend the pawn and somehow not get in the way of his own king. I mean, the only way to make progress here is you've got to move your knight, and you've got to move it to a square where you're then ready to defend the pawn next go. I suppose you could defend it from c7. You could defend it from b8. That's worth exploring, because the idea would be that if you defend it from b8, you just leave the knight on b8, and when white takes it, you come in with your king and you've won. So that's worth exploring. Knight d7, king to b7 attacks your pawn. Obviously knight c5 is going around in circles. Knight b8. But we can just take that, and there's nothing to stop this pawn falling. It's gone. The black king's just too far away. So yeah, that would just be a draw. We'd have to box the white king in. So where have we got to? We've got to here. We can't go to b8 and defend it. Our king's too far away. Nice idea though. So we'd have to go to b4. So knight d3, king attacks the pawn. Knight b4, king attacks the knight. This time we can play knight d5. We've stabilised the situation a little bit, because now the white king can't attack the pawn. And I presume that whoever was playing white calculated this far when they deliberately dropped their bishop to come in and invade the pawns, because realising that this was the only way that black could stabilise it, the plan is now just to get the opposition. And this worked, by the way. They just sort of shuffled their kings back and forth and agreed a draw. Because, yeah, white's got the opposition. But there is a winning plan here. And we've already sort of touched upon it in a way. The problem a minute ago with putting your knight on b8 was that the black king was too far away. Okay. But as a plan, it's actually quite good. Now we go and put our knight on b8 because our king is closer. It's one step closer to where it needs to be. It started the game on f6, didn't it? Or started this position on f6. So yeah, we go and put our knight on b8. Knight f6, knight d7 check, king d6, king c6. Doesn't really matter. King d6, we go to b8, and then the white king is going to come in and hassle us. Or king c6, we play knight b8 check. The white king comes in and hassles us. But it doesn't really matter how the white king hassles us. So we're now just going to leave our knight there and play king d5. We'll just let the knight fall. We couldn't play king d5 before. Now we can. We're just one step closer. King takes b8, and then the final icing on the cake is that you have to shoulder the white king away from getting to c1. c1 is the square that white wants to get to, and you've just taken away one of white's crucial moves to get there. So king c6, and it's won. I mean, to be fair to the guy playing white, whoever it was, I haven't got it written down in front of me. You know, it's like, oh, I can't believe they didn't see that in this position. It's like, well, their opponent was presumably a very good player as well, and couldn't find the winning plan in this position. They just shuffled their kings around. So I think we'll let white off for not finding it in that original position. Right, next. This one's black to play. It was a game involving Keres. Keres was white. And the game was adjourned here. And the guy just resigned it. Because he just realised there was no way he was going to be able to hold on to all of his pawns. And he resigned it. And he looked through it in adjournment. Didn't have an engine to check with. Obviously, he wouldn't have resigned it. But Keres, who was also looking at the game in adjournment, had worked out that white had a draw here. And as soon as black resigned, it's pointed out that what the drawing plan was. So pause the video and see if you can find the drawing plan. So the drawing plan, very well done if you found it. What we're going to do is we're going to get this pawn to move, and then we're going to plonk our knight on h2, defending the g-pawn. And it's just an unbreakable defensive setup. So we play knight e1, force the g-pawn to move. We'll talk about what happens if, in a minute, if white realises your defensive plan and tries to stop you from, or says, right, well, I'm not moving my g-pawn forward. I mean, obviously they've got to defend it. If black wins that pawn, then it's a very easy draw. So let's look at what happens if the pawn goes forward, if white just sort of walks into your defensive plan setup. So you play knight f3, I don't know, king comes back, for example. Knight h2. Bishop takes the pawn. And then you just put king c8. So your plan is you're just going to leave your knight there and move your king back and forth all day. There's absolutely nothing white can do to break this plan. If the king comes in and attacks the knight, you just stick it on f3. And then just move your king back and forth all day. Okay, you can always pass, by the way. We can always pass with the king. So if the king comes in and attacks the knight, we put the knight on f3. If white comes to hassle you over here and takes away your passing, so manoeuvres their king to, I don't know, d6 or something, they're defending their pawn, they've given you this b7 outlet, which you definitely don't want to take because they play king d7 and win the game, then you just move your knight back and forth all day. And then you might think, well, hang on a minute, once your king's defending the c7 pawn, this bishop's free to move. Because at the moment, this bishop has to defend this pawn. Otherwise, it's going to be a very easy draw. You can just take the c7 pawn. You'll probably even just get your knight out of there if you need to. But as soon as the king's defending, let's say the king's on d6, and we're going to use our bishop to try and shift the knight. The only place to shift the knight is to get the bishop to to g1. But then you play knight f3, attacking the bishop with tempo. The bishop has to move, because remember the king's nowhere near. The king's up here defending the pawn on c7. And then you just put your knight back on h2. So there's just no way for white to make progress. It's a completely foolproof defensive plan. I mean, the only last thing that you could think of to do is that we'll bring our king to g2 and then bishop to g1. And then when you play knight f3, then we'll sort of, then we've made some progress. But not really. You can just take the pawn. And I mean, you could probably even swap bishops. Swap bishop for knight and then take the pawn. I suspect that looks like a draw to me. But you don't even have to do that. You can just take the pawn. The bishop has to defend either the king or the bishop has to defend the pawn. If the bishop's defending the pawn, we're just going to leave the knight there. If the king comes to hassle it, we'll stick it on f3. If the king goes to collect the g-pawn, we'll stick it back on h2. And we've always got passing ability over here. And if the king defends the d-pawn and leaves the bishop to come and hassle the knight, then knight f3, as soon as it gets attacked, hits the g1 bishop with tempo, and then you just go back to h2. You can just always move your knight back and forth, h2 and f3, because there's no way white can get in and stop you coming to h2. The bishop would just fall on g1. So absolutely brilliant. So what happens if white thinks, right, well, I've seen that defensive plan, very clever, and Keres did see that defensive plan, actually worked it out for his opponent in a German. What happens if he does that and decides not to push the pawn forward and plays king f2? Well, then we go knight e3 check. King e3 is going around in circles. King g3, you would play e4. Takes the pawn, e3, king f3. This next move is very clever. Knight e1 check. You have to defend the g-pawn, otherwise it's a very easy draw. e2, king f2, and then knight takes g2. So black's got that very clever way to draw it. Right, last one on knight defends the pawn. It's black to play. Pause the video and decide what you would do. So the move you kind of want to play here is, I mean, you want to get your king over here to try and gobble up these two pawns. And the move you really want to play is king d3, whilst you're simultaneously coming over to collect these pawns, whilst keeping the white king shouldered out of the position. There's also another very obvious, seemingly good move that you can play on the first move, which is king d4. Just hit the knight as you come over to collect those pawns. But white's actually got a way to win this. Now, with knight e6 check, your king keeps coming over. You might as well hit the knight as well, because it was stopping your king coming to f4. Knight takes g7, king into f4. But now white can play g5. Black's got nothing better to do than to take that, otherwise we're going to get the same sort of position, but white will have an extra pawn on h4. So black might as well take that, h5. How are you stopping that pawn from running up to h8 and promoting? Well, you'd have to play king e5. And then white can come and guard the f6 square. Knight e8. It's like, okay, I'll go king f5. So if h6, then I can play king g6. But white's just going to keep moving around with the... In fact, you had to play king f5 there, didn't you? You were threatening h6. So white's just going to keep moving around with the knight. King f5, we'll go knight d6 check. King f6. And it's the g3 square that we're on our way to. We can actually play king c2 there. But the g3 square is where we're going. Now that black's played the g5 pawn, we can play knight e4 check, stopping the black king coming to g5 on the way. King f5, king g3. I mean, what does black do? They've had it. The knight defends the pawn, and the white king's just got all day to go and round up the pawns, basically. I mean, the other thing you could check, I suppose, is what happens if black makes a run for it. It's not even close. We've got, even if the black pawn was on g2, and we could play queen h7 g2, even if the black pawn's on g2, it's still not even close. because your winning procedure for a non-rooks or bishop's pawn on the 7th rank is that we can just come down and hassle with the queen, eventually force the king onto g1, and every time you force the king onto g1 in front of its own pawn, you've got one move to bring your king closer. Here you think, oh yeah, but what about the a pawn? Doesn't matter, because we've got an infinite number of moves with the procedure of forcing the king to g1, so we just use some of them to come and collect this pawn before coming over with the king. I mean, that's just going to be a series of one moves. It's going to take a while, but it's not going to take, we haven't got an infinite number of moves, but you get my point, but it's going to be done easily inside the 50 moves after you've captured that a5 pawn. So yeah, king d4 just doesn't do it. And then you realise, like, oh, I wanted to play king d3. That was the move I really wanted to play. So you push the a pawn. That's the brilliant first move. I mean, White's got to deal with that, by the way. They've got to deal with that. So let's say they take it. Probably taking it's the most sensible thing. And then you can play king d4. I mean, you could also play king d3. It's just as good. But you can go king e4. You're shouldering the white king away. Knight c5 check. King f4. I mean, what does white do? There's just no way to stop black liquidating these pawns. They might try and be clever with this. King g4. It's over. It's a draw. So yeah, you wanted this knight out the game. Hence that being the brilliant first move. Because if you didn't, White had a clever way to sort of manoeuvre around, and knight defends pawn, which is what this entire video is about. Right, calling it a day there. Hope everybody found that useful.